Welcome back to the Marriage and Real Estate Podcast. We're your hosts, Kevin and Aisha Shelton, and we are back. We say the same thing every time, but we back again.
Smash that like button.
Oh, God. Okay, I guess that's just as annoying
And
as
hit
me
that
saying we're back.
notification bell. No. I mean, people say it for the YouTube algorithm. Smash the like button, hit that notification bell, and follow us.
The algorithm, though?
The algorithm, that's what the people be saying. That's what the YouTubers be saying. Trying to get my YouTube numbers up, man.
Okay, so we read a great book.
We did.
And not only did we read the book, they came to the Houston area to discuss the book. And they are New York Times bestsellers. Yay. Congratulations, Kevin and Melissa.
So that book is?
Marriage Be Hard.
By Kevin and Melissa Fredericks.
Yes, Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. So we had the opportunity to see Kevin and Melissa speak.
Or Kev on stage.
Kev on stage speak. And this is not like paid endorsement or anything like that. We just
read the book.
Two married people who enjoyed listening to their podcast when it was in rotation. So the Love Hour podcast, and they wrote a book. So they ended the podcast, wrote a book, and the book was really good because marriage really do be hard.
Marriage is definitely hard.
And I feel like it did. So we wanted to take this time. Let me start there. We wanted to take this time to kind of do a book review and our feedback, but not only our feedback, kind of like our experiences and some of the ways it impacted us.
Yeah, I like that. I think we should do more book reviews.
We should.
That's good topics.
So check out Marriage Be Hard by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks. If you're in the Houston area, I would encourage you to stop by Kindred Stories bookstore in the Houston area. That is a Houston-based Black-owned bookstore in the 3rd Ward area. Amazon affiliate link. You could do that too if you're not in the Houston area. Support Black businesses, but also I'm a Black business.
Support this Black business.
But Marriage Be Hard, the book, what were your thoughts on it?
So to jump into the book, the thing that I really liked about the book, number one, on the audiobook, which I'm an auditory learner for those of you who know me and I've talked about books before, they narrate it. So I love that.
That's
so
awesome.
That was one of the best parts of the book for me, was hearing the voices, because it's very similar to listen to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, we listened to the podcast back when it was on. I like their journey because I definitely there's parts of their journey that are very similar to ours. So the things that I enjoyed the book was, kind of them leaving their jobs and them talking about their struggles. Some of the earlier stuff, like the churchy beginnings, I don't necessarily have that background for that. But as they got into the, working a straight job with the aspirations and the dreams, I definitely got into that. And even how they live now and working together and stuff like that. Definitely a lot that I could identify with.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a really good book for our community, for the marriage and real estate community, because we're married and we're in business together for the most part, regardless of if somebody is working a 9-to-5 and the other person is out here doing the entrepreneur real estate thing, or both. But it did a really good job at talking about their journey and some of their struggles, right? And not just like struggles in marriage, because those existed too, but it discussed some of the struggles that they were having with one of them leaving their job, mm-hmm. and that sense of independence, and wanting to have, and it was particularly Melissa who wanted to make sure she had her own money, right? She didn't want to be dependent upon Kevin completely.
Yeah.
And then I also like the fact that they discuss how she felt when she left her job, like the insecurity that she felt even in her own marriage.
I mean, and even the faith that it took. And I can identify this from a Kev on stage perspective. Like, he's like, hey, trust me, leave this job. And her being like, nah, I'm cool. I want to make sure this mortgage gets paid and whatever. So it's definitely the optimal battle between a stabilizer and an igniter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which in some moments it worked out for them, and in some moments it didn't. And definitely early in their marriage when it didn't work out for them, those were rifts that lasted a long time.
Yeah.
So, I think that people don't really think about those arguments. Those small fractures can turn into big chasms over time in a marriage.
Yep.
That's how people end up 20 years later just staring at each other like, hey, or the kids grow up and move on, and then you're like, I don't know this person anymore. It's somewhere along the way there was a little micro tear in your relationship that just grew. and grew and grew. That, 3 months that you didn't have sex, or that, whatever.
Yeah.
And it just became this bigger thing. So it gives a really good window into that in their marriage, and some good practical lessons about how you can start to repair that stuff.
It also was really cool to see, to feel like, or to read in the book like, oh, y'all had this problem too? Because you think and you feel like when you're in the silos of your marriage that you're the only couple that struggle with whatever that struggle may be. And listening to that book from beginning to end, there were several different places where I feel like us as a couple could identify with. And then when I think about the people that have been guests on our podcast, or people that we know personally that are kind of on this marriage and real estate journey, how they've had some of these similar experiences too. So I definitely would say it's an excellent read. And you should absolutely pick it up, but don't just pick it up and read it for yourself. Read it with your partner. If you can get your partner to read it, whether that's audiobook or physical book or whatever, if you can get your partner to read it, it would be so much more beneficial, because there's so many aha moments like, oh man, you got to remember when they said this, because we had a lot of those kinds of moments as well.
The coolest thing is probably, and after reading the book, I could go back and look at our own life, is when something was supposed to happen out for them and it didn't happen, and then you see the years later, because they got 20 years of marriage, so 20 years of life experience, right? So the things that they encountered early in their marriage, whether it's their first house or whatever, to even a couple of years ago losing their dream house, and then what that
spoiler alert.
It's not a spoiler alert. If you follow them, you know
that's true.
So these are all publicly documented stories, but what it doesn't document is the feelings behind it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when they do share their feelings about that first house, and, hey, one person want to let that house go into foreclosure, and another person like, oh no, maybe we should rent it out. And then even, with this latest thing right before the pandemic, losing their dream house.
Yeah.
Those are real world situations, and I don't think people think about it like that, right? Like, you don't think about this loss year, whatever. 3 years later, you feel differently, and something happens with that. And I know for us, especially after our 2019 and all of the trials in our life and our marriage, while, we didn't necessarily lose a house, we lost lots of other things.
We did.
And we gained lots of other things. And it's only now, that we can go back and look and say, man, I'm glad. It's like we talked about yesterday with, Charleston number 2 or whatever. It's like, well, look how the market changed.
It was. So I'll say that too. So it's always affirming. And now I can stand in the affirmation of like, no, right? So you make these well laid out plans, and for some reason, God says no. Like, it's just a no. Like, it's not gonna work. So in the book Marriage Be Hard, their no was they were building their dream home, and right before they were gonna close,
literally,
right before they were gonna close, like literally, you just imagine choosing everything that you want in your dream home. If you've ever built a house before, you visit it all the time. You just simply can't wait to get into this space. And then right before the pandemic, jumbo loans kind of went bust, right? So they have this big, beautiful home, and they couldn't finance the house, right? So they had to let it go. But what it felt like, and what the long range plan was a setup for them to buy their studio, right? And they were already in LA. Were they already in California?
They were all in California.
Okay, so to buy their studio. And so you couldn't call that. Like, you couldn't predict it, but it was tough. It was more tough for Melissa than it was for Kevin, but it was still tough to like go through this entire process and be this close to what you feel like is your dream, because you have something greater on the other side. And so our story, just to add a little color to what you were saying, so we built $1 million home in 3rd Ward in Houston, right? And the plan was there was a lot for sale 2 houses down from that. Yep. So the plan was to buy that lot. And not only was it the plan, we literally bought the lot. We closed. We bought the lot. We owned the lot next to it, and we were like, okay, we're going to put another $1 million house 2 houses down. Literally closed the transaction, like both parties signed, and the only thing that was left was for money to be exchanged, for it to be for consideration, right? Closed and funded. It did not fund. on a clerical error. It did not fund. Okay. And in that not funding, another buyer came and scooped it from underneath us, offered more money, and we didn't get the house.
And we had to let it go.
We
there
did.
was a moment we could have sued. We could have done it.
And it really, we were like, there's a reason.
If it's not for us. But we learned that lesson.
We did learn that lesson, but it was so much easier to let that go. And it was disappointing because, let me be clear, I want to sell $2 million houses right next door to each other. Like, that would be great for income for the construction company, an amazing commission for me as a real estate agent. But it was a no. And we were just like, for whatever reason, we're not supposed to have it. Okay. This was last year.
Mm-hmm.
This was last year.
It was earlier this year.
It was earlier this year. Okay.
This year.
So flip the coin. We sold the $1 million house. We set the comps in the area. And then today, interest rates are 7%.
Yep.
Right? So if you can imagine the difference between a mortgage on a 7%, $1 million house on a 7% interest rate versus, I think when our buyers bought, they were at like 4. Yeah, something like that. It's a huge difference. It's a big amount of money. So the ability to move that property, this $1 million property, it just wouldn't have been as seamless.
Part of, even though our buyers, as well qualified as they are, they wouldn't have bought our house at 7%.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a tough one, but God said no. And so it was just affirming to read that in the book. I feel like when you're married, you'll go through different phases of that in your marriage. And I think if each and every one of you stop and take a look back, you can look back and say, oh, that's why God didn't give us that. Or, oh, that's why that didn't work out the way we wanted it to. And you can see the reason why a little bit further ahead.
But it gives it. The thing that I really liked about the book, especially being married and being in business, it gives you insight into somebody else's journey, which of course mirrors your own, right? So you get to see, okay, what's 5 years past where we are now look like? What's, 3 years past where we are now look like? So when I look at even some of the opportunities on the table are our struggles today. And I go, oh, well, man, they were struggling with this 3 years ago. And here's how that worked out for them. And while it doesn't work out for you necessarily the same way, what it does is show you that it will work out some kind of way.
Yeah.
It gives you faith, right? Like 99% of the time when you're going through it, you feel like this world ending. This is going to be, the sky is opening up and the Lord is taking away everything you got. And that's just not true. It's a temporary feeling. It's a momentary feeling. And I'm the king of momentary feeling.
The king.
King of momentary
Absolute king.
But having perspective helps calm that down.
Yeah.
So, it's like when you have the ability to take inventory of what you do have, and then you get to see through somebody else's experiences, it turning into something beautiful.
Yeah.
You can have appreciation for where you are and sit in the faith that it requires to last to whatever the next outcome is going to be.
So what did you walk away with? What did you walk away and was there anything that you feel like you could do different or that you specifically identified with and was like, okay, I could change this or fix this or do something better?
Well, there are about 3 points that I specifically took away from. First, if you work with your spouse and y'all work well together, do everything in your power to maintain that. Because one of the things that, they lost along the way was that.
Yeah.
And that was a cautionary tale. Second part is it always gets better.
Yeah.
Right. Always gets better. No matter what you're going through.
Does it always get better or it always gets better when two people are working towards the same outcome? Because it do not always get better, I feel like.
Well, you're adding
You're right. Okay.
If you're working
Let me go with it. Go with it.
If
go with it.
If you're working on it, it always gets better.
Okay.
Now, that's true. If you're not working on it, it will get certainly worse. But if you're working on it, it always gets better. That's a good frame up. The third part is when you're chasing your dreams, right, it has to be an all-inclusive thing. It can't be one person's dream.
Yep.
It has to be both of your dreams because what happens is you sacrifice so much along the way that it creates this resentment, and there's a loss of sense of self for that other person. So one person may be doing great and the other person may be suffering. So you have to do it collaboratively so that both people can feel whole when you get to wherever you're going.
Yeah. And I feel like at the end of the book that Melissa was still kind of struggling with that, right?
True.
Like Kevin is
it
where
sounded like she cried the entire book.
Yeah, Kevin was where he wants to be, and his dream has been, not ultimately realized because he has grander dreams, but he's living his dream, and she's still trying to figure out what her life and her dream looks like.
I think that's something they lost along the way,
but can be recaptured, right? True. But she has some self-discovery. That's a part of that. And we've been there before too, when, I'm trying to figure out, who am I? What am I doing? What does this look like? And you always knew what your dream was, and you were pursuing it. And I'm in the middle trying to figure out, well, who am I going to be in this new space that we're in, and where am I going to reside? And so I think that's something that comes up for couples that are in this space too. But there's one person who's very dead set on what that dream is, and another person who's still trying to figure out where they fit into it.
No, that's true. And I think that's where the working with your partner part comes in, right? Because, he had to create space and comfort for her to now feel comfortable figuring, like, he had to do a lot to stabilize them. And I'm thinking about the story to add color about, them ending the Love Hour podcast and them starting a new podcast to replace the income.
That was so messed up.
But what it shows is this: the sacrifice that he was making was to make sure they had a stable financial base, right? Now, it definitely showed up real messed up.
It really seemed like he just didn't want to work with her no more. Because for you to quit your podcast with your wife and then start a new podcast, if I would have done that to you, you would be
the podcast
in your fit. No, they decided to cancel the podcast.
No. She said
because of Kevin's time.
She was trying to help him with his
She was trying to give him more time.
He ain't asked for no time.
Listen,
I'll tell you this: you cancel this podcast and go start the real estate podcast,
you would be upset.
I would be pissed.
I know. That's what I'm saying. For us to make a joint decision and say, hey, we're going to cancel this podcast that we're doing together, and then I go do a podcast with some other people. That's
why you always work with your spouse.
That's
the lesson I learned.
That's why you always work with your spouse.
Look, I'm planning the new office for us now. I got our offices right smack together.
Oh my God.
Because literally, work with your spouse.
It was also good. You know what was reignited for me, and these common themes that I feel like as a wife, I always have to be reminded about how important it is to check in with intimacy in our marriage. You know what I'm saying? That it's super easy to get comfortable with the mundane of life or the growth of your business and all of that you don't spend time like being intimate and more than just sexual, but intimate time with your partner. And when you're climbing the top or racing towards your dream, like you don't want to miss that. And one of the reasons, and they didn't say this in the book, but in my mind, I'm thinking one of the reasons that you don't want to miss that is because when you do get to the top and there's that void there that exists, somebody is vulnerable. You know what I'm saying?
And there's a hole in your marriage.
Yeah, that's a vulnerability in your marriage. And so it's always good for me to listen to books and also be accountable.
In my household.
Okay. And also be accountable with other women, right? Like I had a group of friends before that we used to check in, be like, girl, did you get your husband some? Because that's a good man. He really needs, you really should do that. Like you have to check in because it's so easy to get just caught up with all of the rest of the stuff in life.
You also got to express your feelings too, because sometimes I think that comfort is a thing and boundaries are a thing, right? So
they talked about that. Yeah,
they talked about boundaries because when you don't work with your spouse and you're kind of off on your own, boundaries are a thing. So for those of you who one spouse is working and the other spouse is entrepreneurial, you have to have boundaries because that's the only thing that's going to help this partner that's working every day feel comfortable to fact you out in the world. You know what I mean? Like that's a hard feeling. Especially somebody going to work every day, they're clocking in this job and vice versa because somebody could get it at the job too.
Right.
So you have to have those boundaries to protect your marriage and your partner, but it's y'all forsaking the world. So you need to make sure like, hey, look, if you don't feel comfortable with this, no problem. Let me take care of that. If I don't feel comfortable with this, hopefully, you take care of that, because at the end of the day, the important relationship is your marriage. All these people, there's going to be a lot of people around, but you want to protect your marriage.
And I think to sum up like the entire book, where they came from and where they are right now, and the overarching theme was how important communication is in your marriage.
Yep.
And making sure that you're having consistent and intentional conversations about how you feeling, like what do you need and what do you need, or wait, is this a problem for you? Let's talk about what that how that can look going forward, kind of thing. And again, another easy way to get like lost, like you just get so busy doing the work of life or the work of business that part gets lost. And so I think it was a reminder for us.
No, it was a great book. We look forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Marriage Be Hard. For those of you, check the link in the bio, please. Kindred Stories if you're in the H.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, this is the Marriage and Real Estate Podcast. I'm Kevin, and that's Aisha. We out.